It's so nice to have everybody here today. My name is Dory Branch, and I am the Associate Director for the Bobcat Career Network in the Alumni Association. Welcome to Making the Leap, jumping into a new career for our webcast today. If you have any questions throughout the event, please feel free to put them into the chat area, and we will get to those throughout the session, or at the very least, at the end, we will have a Q&A portion of our event where we will be able to answer all of your questions. So today, I would like to introduce our moderator, Colleen Carroll. Colleen is a 30-year resident of Ohio University and a 3-time Bobcat. She's also an employee of Ohio University of more than 20 years. So she is a Bobcat through and through, all of the green blood in there. So Colleen recently actually experienced a career change of her own prior to her current role as the Director of Alumni Success for the Alumni Association. She was the Senior Director of Communications for the Russ College of Engineering and Technology for more than 17 years. So Colleen, take it away.
Thank you so much, Dory. It's great to be here with everyone. And I'm super excited for this panel. I think it's going to be really uplifting and supportive. We have a great array of panelists with some really interesting stories. So let me go ahead and introduce them. First, we have Carrie Grogan. She currently serves as the Director of Learning and Development for Ratio Design. She was in higher ed for a decade and then transitioned to an employee engagement role with this new interdisciplinary design firm of hers. In her role, she's responsible for education and leadership training, performance management and mentorship, culture and social engagement, and also creating inclusivity. There's inclusivity at Ratio, which is the firm's equity, diversity, and inclusion initiative. Her background in student involvement and leadership development translates to skills in counseling, emotional intelligence, supervision, strengths coaching, and training to a new audience. And I'm really excited to hear about that. She's a 2-time Bobcat, graduating with her Bachelor of Specialized Studies in 2007 and her Master of Education degree in 2009. We have another Carrie also on our panel, Carrie Turner, who's a longtime friend of mine. She's a freelance photographer in Asheville, North Carolina, an Athens, Ohio native. She founded her own company, Carrie Turner Photography, 10 years ago to offer business branding, product, lifestyle, food and beverage, and wedding and event photography, and also portraiture. Her clients include commercial clients, nonprofits, planning firms, restaurants, educational institutions, and individuals. And her work has been published in national, regional, and local magazines and blogs. She was formerly, though, a local government planning and nonprofit employee for 10 years. So big career change there. And that was at a regional council in Asheville and at the National Safe Routes to School National Partnership. Her project experience includes rural and urban transportation planning, regional sustainable development planning, and complete streets advocacy. She's a 3-time Bobcat and holds a master's degree in geography, a bachelor's in biology, and a bachelor's in visual communication and photojournalism. And then we also have with us today Paul Woody. He is the Vice President of Business Development for the Pro Rodeo Cowboys Association, which is a national sanctioning body for the sport of rodeo based in Colorado Springs, Colorado since 2019. Prior to joining PRCA, he was General Manager for IMG at the Air Force Academy for 6 years and 9 years total with IMG College. He arrived in Colorado Springs in 2013 after stops at Ohio University and UNLV with IMG. And prior to IMG, he spent 5 years in NASCAR at Las Vegas Motor Speedway and 1 year with TCU in the athletics marketing department. So lots of changes in there to hear about today. He received his PhD from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas in 2016 after receiving an MBA and an MSA from Ohio University. And he also received his physics degree from Hendrix College in Conway, Arkansas. He was a busy guy. Enjoys his time with his 2 sons and his wife, and he's a member of Rotary Club International and serves on the board of directors for the Homefront Military Network, which is a local charity focusing on financial bridge assistance for veterans. So as promised, as you can see, we have really some great alumni here who have experienced a whole host of career changes and challenges to share with you today. So with further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. What I'm going to do is pose a question to the panelists and ask one of them to start, and we'll kind of go round robin. And then with the next question, we'll start a different person, just so that we eliminate that oh so awkward talking over each other on Zoom, which I'm sure we've all experienced in some way, shape, or form over the last almost year. So Carrie, Grogan, I'm starting with you. You're in the hot seat. But the first question would just be for each of you to briefly share how your career change came about. We know career changes can happen for a variety of reasons and through a variety of ways. I myself, this past May, my position was eliminated. So I experienced a layoff, so it wasn't a voluntary thing. But I survived thanks to the Bobcat Network. So we'd like to hear about your career change and just kind of how it came about in your own words. So Carrie, take it away.
Yeah. So after about 10 years working in student affairs, student involvement specifically, at a variety of institutions, types of institutions, locations, I was just feeling really kind of stuck. I wasn't quite sure that the path that naturally laid forward in my career trajectory was what I was interested in. I went out for a few interviews to be like a director of student involvement, that next reliable step of what you're supposed to do in a student affairs career. And I just wasn't feeling it. Like in those interviews, it didn't feel like a great fit, not because of the institution, but because of the role. I just wasn't really interested in those sort of responsibilities in a way that I thought I would be. And yeah, so I was just feeling stuck, not quite sure what that meant for me within student affairs, what that meant for this whole career I had built up for myself. And I went to brunch with a friend. I always will give her all of the credit. And I went to brunch with a friend and I made the joke that I just wanted a job where I could tell people to do better. And that is a part of advising students and helping students be successful in college. But it's also a lot more than that. And she understood the joke and what I was getting at. And she said, Carrie, that is a thing. It exists within HR. It exists in the private industry. Like that is a job you can do. It's talent development, it's org development, it's a lot of different titles, but it is a whole position. And I was like, I took business classes in college. I don't remember this being a thing at all. And I think I just didn't pay attention very much in those classes because it turns out it was a whole thing. And so I started doing informational interviews and really focused on that for about 3 months, just learning what this industry was, how I thought I could translate a career into it. And learning from folks who had already successfully made that transition from student affairs to a more HR leaning role.
Thanks for sharing. I love that your story really shows that you did that outreach, some networking, and then you did your research in your own way, that information gathering with the informational interviews. Those are two good takeaways from your experience. Carrie Turner, you're up next. Tell us about how you founded your photo business. You made a pretty extreme change.
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Colleen. It's great to be here. And so since I'm a photographer, I can't do something like this without sharing some photos. So I thought a nice place to start would be to show that I've been an OU Bobcat fan for a long time. And as Colleen mentioned, I grew up in Athens. And so this is a photo of me as a kid in my Ohio University sweatshirt out on the farm and with one of my first cameras. And so that was kind of where I got my start being interested in photography, was just walking around in the woods and taking photos. So you can go to the next slide if you want. So in 1996, I started in the VisCom school at Ohio University, and I went to the Scotland Field School, which is a study abroad program there. And I did a newspaper internship, but I decided to go ahead and complete another degree at that time, not really feeling quite ready to jump into photojournalism as a career. So I got a bachelor's in biology, and then a couple of years later, a master's in geography. And that led to working in local government. So I moved to Asheville in 2005 and started working at a regional local government agency. And I was mostly focused, we were working with counties and municipalities on planning and economic development. I was mostly focused on transportation, and I was able to, advance through management, and it was a great government job with good benefits and lots of security. But I did feel like something was really missing for me. I had always had creative outlets, and to not have that be a really prominent part of my life just felt wrong, and it just didn't feel like quite the right path for me. And that's not to say you can't be creative in any job, but it just, the creative outlets I did have at work were not enough. And the other piece of it was that I became a mom. And for me, that lifestyle of working a full-time 9-to-5 job at the office every day was very incompatible with having kids. Again, not that you can't do that. I think it's totally possible, but it just wasn't working well for me. And so one day I was driving back to work on my lunch hour, and I saw a car in front of me that had a bumper sticker on it that said, "Love my job, love my boss, I'm self-employed." And I was at a stoplight, so I wrote it down like on a scrap of paper, and I stuck it in my glove box. And I just thought, I have got to start to change my life, because I don't like this lifestyle and I want to do something else. So I started out really small, just doing freelance work as a photographer on the side in my spare time with little kids. And, making connections in our community with other photographers, doing the things that I could on the side. And as my business grew and my kids grew, I was able to kind of scale back my hours at my job. But the thought of just walking in to my job at Land of Sky Regional Council and saying, I quit, was just something I couldn't quite do. My husband is a musician, and it just felt too much of a risk. So I decided to get a different job and transition into something that kind of had an end in sight. So I took a job working with the Safe Routes to School National Partnership, which was a national nonprofit. And when I was hired, I was told this is a grant funded position and it may not last that long. And that was fine with me, because I knew then it would be a way I could sort of, transition out of my job. And so sure enough, about a year after taking that job, I was laid off. And so then I could just completely focus on photography. So that's what I've been doing. The freelance business I've had for about 10 years. And so, I've mostly, like Colleen said, focused on branding and working with small businesses and food and drink type photography, but also other types of stuff, lifestyle events, weddings, things like that. I've been able to maintain some connections to my previous professional life through my photography work. So working with some of my former employers as a photographer. One of my biggest clients worked with me at the nonprofit. She left that job, started her own business, and now I'm her principal photographer. So those connections from my previous career have helped build my current work as well.
Thanks so much for sharing your story in great depth, and also with the images. It's nice to have the illustrations, especially as you talk about, sort of like your personal journey, and seeing those images of you at different periods in your life, and understanding kind of what was going through your head at those times is really helpful.
Thanks.
Sure. Paul, tell us about the rodeo.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate being asked, and I also appreciate going last in the three, because I was able to write down some notes and think about the things that Ms. Grogan and Ms. Turner shared with the group. I guess every step of my path has been a change. I grew up in Texas, and everybody was going to big state schools, and I decided to leave the state and go to a small liberal arts institution where I was going to be an engineer, hence the physics degree, and then determined I didn't want anything to do with that, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then a little birdie told me about Ohio University and their great sports administration graduate program. And so that set my life on a totally different path. Through NASCAR and through college athletics, a decade in college athletics, and then now working in rodeo. But the common thread in all of those changes has been my peer group and my mentors that I I obtained through Ohio University. Each of the career changes and career paths has been led through a conversation or through one of those contacts that I got when I was in Athens, or through that network of alumni, and it's been great. I know some of the other questions we'll go through, talk about the skill sets and the things that helped me succeed, or I'd like to think succeeding through these things. But there's always an itch internally that I try and scratch with those changes. Personal growth, professional growth, it's all about finding a challenge that helps me get up in the morning and try and not stay too comfortable. And working for the PRCA, we're a national sanctioning body, and this is a national role, and that's something that I had never had before. And so building relationships in the sales world with Fortune 500 companies is a different challenge when you're not hosting them at a basketball game or a hockey game, or going and grabbing a drink with them. And so finding that new skill set and how I can grow and do things to improve the association that I'm with is why I made that change. And so it's exciting and scary, and I'm lucky that I have a network of people that I can lean on, and a wife that stands beside me, and it's fun and exciting, and looking forward to continuing to share with the Carries today. So that's the long and the short of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. I love hearing that Ohio University did play a role for you in those Bobcat connections. So we have 270,000 alumni across the world. And when you think about that number, it's like, okay, there's one or a handful of people within that group who are going to be available and not just willing, but who want to help you out. I was remarking to Dory in planning for today that, when I was laid off, I spent so much time doing networking, and I had a ball. Like, I had a blast, connecting to all sorts of Bobcats, and that was just so helpful to me during that time. So hopefully we'll do a little bit more of that today. So the next question, Carrie Turner, I'd love to start with you. And you covered a little bit of this, in your intro talk, but maybe there's something specific you want to tell us a little bit more about. It's just, when you were facing, as part of your process of making your career change, what were some of the roadblocks, or was there like a particular one you would like to tell us about? So you talked about motherhood and, having a spouse and partner who's a musician, so financial constraints and all that, but maybe you could dive into something or just share some thoughts.
Sure. Yeah, I think that was really my biggest roadblock, I feel like, was just sort of logistics. Like, how do I do this? It just felt like such an uncharted territory, and a big leap. And so I think, some of the ways I overcame that were, trying to do it in a way that was gradual and allowed me to sort of ease into the changes that I needed to make. That wasn't without frustration, because, I know we all have days at work where you want to have like the Jerry Maguire scene where you're like, I'm done, and you leave. But, I think because I did do it in a way that was gradual and, amenable with everybody, that allowed me to maintain these really good relationships so that, I can return to them now, and still have those people I can work with. So I would say that, and also just finding support, and we're going to talk about this on another question as well. But, finding those mentors maybe that are already doing something similar, or just people who can, support you as you kind of make that transition.
Thank you. Paul, what about you? Roadblocks, challenges, how did you overcome them?
It seems to me in the sales world and creating networks and convincing people to give you their hard-earned money, that you have to be able to establish genuine relationships. And everyone across all walks of life appears to have a larger sense of skepticism of the genuine nature of who they're talking to, and business dealings and personal relationships. And so quickly trying to educate myself on the community or the world or the industry that I've changed and moved into is no small task. And it's kind of showing that you're vulnerable and asking those questions, and trying not to portray the fact that I know everything, because I certainly don't. And so it's trying to get the buy-in from the constituents in your organization and in your community with that genuine nature. And sometimes that roadblock is larger than others, but every change I've made, it's identifying that roadblock and then trying to figure out how I can be genuine to someone that's willing to help me out. And then you find those people either in the building or outside the building that are gonna help you and believe in you. And that's been a significant part of my success.
I like that idea of just trying to identify the roadblock. I feel like sometimes it's easy to feel just very overwhelmed or burdened or stressed out, and just to ask ourselves that question: why am I struggling? You know, what feels like the biggest hurdle I'm facing right now? And then having that step two, like you mentioned, knowing that once you identify it, like it's okay to face this hurdle or this challenge or fear, because the next step is going to be who can help me with it. And there's going to be someone, like you said, either inside the building or outside the building that can help. Carrie, Grogan, tell us about you. Any challenges or roadblocks that you could share?
Yeah, a big one for me was explaining my background and my experiences through the lens of the industry that I was moving to. And those informational interviews I had when they were with other ex-student affairs people, they got it and they were able to really help me translate. And then I would meet with people who have no idea what student affairs is, what my background was, and they would just say like, "Oh, so you teach kids?" And I was like, "Oh no, not at all. I can't believe that's what you got out of my resume. Crap." And so it was a lot of really nitpicking the language to make sure that I was translating it the right way. I know that I can do this work, but if the person reading it doesn't get that, I'm not even getting through the door. By the end of that 3 months of informational interviews, I was blatantly asking people, why would you not hire me? Like looking at this or looking at my resume, what would make you hesitant to hire me? And it was really helpful feedback to say, the way I'm reading this, I think that this is what your background says. And it was like, all right, so I'll tweak that some more. And so really just, yeah, I'd been kind of indoctrinated in learning and education and student affairs, and being able to use more business outcomes in my language is something I still continue to work on, but definitely needed to do to get through the door. And one other thing that I think we've spoken to a bit is that imposter syndrome and just fear of doing the right thing. Like, is this actually what I want? The change that I want, and am I even capable of this? And so trying something new, being confident in that, but also not over promising my skill set is really this bridge that I'm constantly walking across. That I want to be confident, I want to say that I know what I'm doing, but also there's a lot that I don't know what I'm doing, and knowing that, being okay with those areas of growth are all part of the journey that I'm still on.
I think that's appealing to an employer when you can identify those things, and because I think it shows self-awareness. What I got from what you just shared, it sounds like your process was really one of confidence. Like your confidence really grew when you said that by toward the end of your interviewing, you were able to say, "Why wouldn't you hire me?" That you gained a lot of self-awareness, but you also grew your skills through that process. And so you're able to be more articulate and focused and confident by the end. That's really cool. So what about skill sets? You all have, changed careers, and we all have our own buckets of skill sets, and some of those are transferable, right? So Carrie, you just talked about, how to speak about your experience with more of a business focus, but also down to the actual skills. So Paul, you once had an interest in engineering, and now you're, a vice president of business development for this rodeo association. What skills have been transferable for you, Paul, across your career?
We kind of have all touched on it, and the confidence. It's a humble confidence. Nobody likes the bravado that sometimes comes with confidence, and so it's being humble and understanding you don't know everything. And I talked about that as you go in and try and quickly learn that other language. Whether it was when I was in NASCAR or rodeo, those are not things that I grew up around. I can't claim to know which end of the rope to hold, but you gain that confidence that I know that I can bring myself up to speed. But the thing that I always teach my kids, and I teach any young salesperson that's coming up, is a relentless politeness. Nobody is ever going to shut you down if you are continually polite to them as you're trying to progress your career or you're trying to achieve something on your team. Be relentlessly polite, and that will take you a long way. But a skill set that I didn't have, that I've had to teach myself, is a patience, both when I speak and when I try and learn. When I went through my PhD program, somebody taught me that when you're trying to get your point across, there's no punishment or penalty for taking your time and thinking through how you're going to convey your thoughts. Sometimes we're all trying to hit that 8-second social media whiz bang gotcha moment, and that's not the way that I've taught myself to get through life and be able to get my point across. But being patient and slow and trying to be methodical in how I speak, and that served me well both in my career and in my personal life. But I did not have that when I was leaving Court Street as a 25-year-old.
Thanks for sharing that. Carrie, I'm going to come back to you. Carrie Grogan, I'm going to come back to you. And apologies if I'm getting my order mixed up, but I'm doing my best here. I'm looking at questions in the chat, which are awesome. I will remind everyone listening to drop your questions in the chat, and I'll do my best to try to throw those our panelists' way as we're talking, or if we don't get to them during our talk, we'll hit them at the end. Let's see. One of our panelists, Carrie Grogan said that she was military for years before, and translating that stuff is hard. So she really appreciated your talk, Carrie Grogan, about translating, your student affairs skills to the business development. And she liked how you mentioned using that lens to look at yourself from an employer perspective. So just a comment from a panelist. But let's hear from you about a little bit more about the transferable skills. Specifically, you were in student affairs and now you're in a much different role. What skills did you take along with you?
All of them.
Okay.
I use everything every day. Mostly for my master's program, which was focused on student affairs, but even some from undergrad, I was in event management. So a lot of like project management, business classes, marketing. Hell, even my recreation minor I use because our architecture firm designs parks and recreation. And every now and then I'll chime in and pretend like I know what they're talking about. But in particular, my counseling classes that I took, management courses, even student development theory, like the ability to talk to people, to help them problem solve, to make them feel heard, to make them feel appreciated, that translates no matter what career I'm doing. Working with students to help them feel like they matter and they can be successful, and it's okay to be on a journey and to not have it all figured out. It doesn't matter if you are 18 hearing that message or you are 50 hearing that message. People still need to hear that every day. I often will tell people looking to leave student affairs that I do the exact same job, except my students look different. If you change that mindset, you can open up a whole bunch of doors. But a very specific thing that someone recommended to me when I was early in my consideration of changing was to change my resume from chronological to functional. And that made all the difference. So instead of listing university after university of job, which then to everyone said, all I do is teach, what I did was say that I do project management and I do facilitation and I do data management, and all of these functions that I do translates to so many other careers. So that, not easy switch, but once it was done, relatively easy switch, really helped to open some doors.
That sounds like a massive editing task. We did have a question. Someone wanted a little bit more information on informational interviews, and you had mentioned that. So I wonder if you could touch on that quickly, and then we'll get to you next, Carrie Turner, about transferable skills. But Carrie Grogan, the informational interviews, I was curious myself, how did you go about doing those?
Yeah, so my first round, I just scanned all of my LinkedIn connections and found people that I knew from student affairs whose titles had changed to something else. And I was like, oh, I don't know when you did this, but this is interesting. Can you talk to me? I met you at a conference 6 years ago. How about let's jump on the phone for 20 minutes. And so those people would then connect me to other people. And then after talking to probably 4 or 5 folks who got it, who like knew student affairs, then I just started cold calling, cold emailing people through LinkedIn whose position sounded like something I was interested in. I made sure to only reach out to people who were in geographic areas I wasn't applying for, so that they didn't feel any sort of issue in talking very honestly to me. Because if you are located in Atlanta and I'm telling you I'm staying in Chicago, I'm not leaving Chicago, you don't mind telling me, because I'm not at risk of applying for your job and having some weird in or anything like that. And people like to talk about themselves. It's okay to ask people to share their experience. The 3 of us right now are like, hell yes, let's talk on this panel. We love to talk about our background and experience and share. So just ask people and see if they'll give you 20 minutes.
That's great advice. Thank you. Okay, Carrie Turner, tell us about transferable skills, from geography to photography, starting your own business. It's a lot.
Sure. So, I think a lot of what you have to do as a business owner is very similar to some of the things that Carrie Grogan was talking about, project management and really solid communications. I really make a point to make sure that everything that comes from me looks really professional in the way that I present it and what I write, and even my invoices, just everything. I want to seem very professional. Because it just automatically makes your client have more confidence in your ability to get them what they need. And I think also, a big part of being a photographer is being a good listener and, forming real genuine relationships with my clients. And believe it or not, being a transportation planner and having to go to public meetings and listen to people, I couldn't always help them solve their problems, but it was a good, training ground for trying to listen and figure out what my clients need. And then there were a lot of skills that I did have to relearn. The world of photography has changed completely since I was at OU. I was shooting film. It's digital now. I had to totally learn how to process my work in a new way. And so I just had to take a lot of classes online is basically what I did. But I also took a lot of small business management classes, like with our small business technology development center here, that sort of thing, like identifying those areas where I really knew I needed help and then getting that help. And then I guess the other thing is just as a business owner, it sometimes feels a little counterintuitive to connect with your competition. But that's been really important as well, just to build that network of all these other photographers who we can refer work to one another and help each other and, be supportive, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I love that idea of partnering with the competition. I mean, maybe you can share work that way, if someone gets a request to shoot an event or something that they can't do, and then they can hand it off to you and or come to each other's aid if there's some sort of a crisis or emergency. That's a great strategy. So Carrie Grogan, we're going to come back to you for the next question. And that is just about, who or what was most helpful to you in your transition. You've talked about the informational interviews and reaching out, but what a person or a thing, what worked best for you?
Yeah, I spoke a little bit about that imposter syndrome, and I felt like the best way to get over that was to actually know what I was doing and know what I was talking about. And so, all of the networking possible before the pandemic, at least once a month, I was going to a meetup group here in the city, sometimes more frequently than that. I joined a few professional associations, all related to this industry, and would attend webinars and would attend meetup conferences just to learn, even if it wasn't directly related to what I was doing. I wanted to know that I was speaking the lingo, that I knew what trends were. Prior to this, I had whole degrees to teach me what I was doing. And now I needed to learn it as I went. And so those organizations were really powerful to me. For the social network of it, of feeling better, I joined a Facebook group literally called Expats of Student Affairs. It is specifically for people who leave that field. And there's such a camaraderie in that, and feeling like, okay, I'm not crazy. This was still a useful 10 years and whole master's degree for me. And that was tremendous. I think that I could still really benefit from mentorship outside of my organization. I have a really great supervisor that's helping me understand the greater context of executive coaching and leadership development, but she sees my work every day, and I can really use an outside perspective who just is someone talking to me about this industry in a bigger sense. So that's something I'm still working on. I've only been out for 2 years, so give me a little time, but that's been most useful for me.
Awesome. Thank you. And Carrie Turner, back to you. What about you? What or who has been most helpful to you?
I just, I really resonate with the idea of imposter syndrome that Carrie Grogan is talking about. And, I think if you're doing something like this, you have to have those people that can serve as your cheerleaders and kind of a sounding board for you. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone in your career field, but I feel like I have a small handful of people close to me who really believe in what I'm doing and have believed in me from before day one. And you have to have those people around you. And then I think, part of that too is that I do have one really close friend who is a good supporter, who is has had her own freelance photography business. So, having somebody who you really can bounce these direct ideas off of, and we're not in the same market, as Carrie Grogan pointed out. That's really important, so we could say, like, what do you think I should charge for this? Or, how do I deal with this client? And there wasn't any competition between us for that. So I think, finding those cheerleaders and someone who can be a sounding board for you with really specific questions is really critical.
Definitely. Paul, what about you? What or who has been most helpful to you?
A healthy work environment means that you have good personal relationships at that employer or in your organization, and you spend years developing those relationships. And your initial reaction when you start looking to leave, you immediately block out the people that you've created these relationships with at your current employer. And I make a concerted effort to not do that. I had really good mentors and a network of people in these places that I had worked, just because I wanted to leave, it was not a statement of, well, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be around you. And so don't neglect those relationships that you had created in your current organization. And, there's still a couple of really good, positive mentors and peers that I have from prior stops that I will bounce ideas off of, and are still really good resources for me. In addition to the people that I've met through the Ohio network, obviously. But don't neglect the people that you've worked so hard to find and found good relationships with, just because you're trying to leave that organization.
I think that's a really good point, and it speaks to having a really healthy mentor relationship or just interpersonal connection with folks. If you can be that honest and authentic with people, both from the employee to the manager and from the manager back to the employee. I always felt like as a manager, while it might be sad to see a really talented person go, that it also is like the highest compliment, right? That person grew, achieved, succeeded, and now they're spreading their wings and going off to do something bigger and better. And like you said, to remain connected, right? Even once you move on, and continue that mentorship or relationship and be able to help each other in the future. It's great advice. So talking about advice, speaking of advice, Carrie Turner, I'd like to come back to you. What would be your advice to someone considering a career change? I know it's maybe hard to speak a little generally, but someone who's either going through one right now or considering one, is there, I guess, anything else you'd like to add, or a crystal of wisdom to share?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of what we've talked about today has focused on relationships. And I think I would just add, not to disregard the idea that even in vastly different careers, you can still, find connections to where you started. And I think another piece of advice that I think is helpful is to think of every new client or new project or new job as a new branch on a tree, that it can always lead to something else. There's these connections between all the work that you do, and to treat every new opportunity like that, like this is this opportunity, but it may be related to all these other ones. So, allowing it to be part of that process, I guess.
I love that. And let's make this a two-part question, because we have a great question in the chat that I think is kind of related in a way. But how did you know what career to settle on after your life experiences? So you were this kid taking pictures in the woods, but I think it's easy for someone to feel a little lost. Life takes us down many paths, right, and gives us many experiences. So how did you really know that maybe it was time, or know that this is what you needed to do?
Gosh, that's such a great question, because it's never possible to completely know.
Right. I guess that's the thing.
But I think for me, it was a combination of finding something that has always been a part of me, something I have always loved. And it doesn't have to be something as tangible as photography. It could just be, I love listening to people or helping them with these kinds of issues. It can be anything, but something that you love very, very deeply, that you can think of the first time you experienced it and it was great for you. And thinking about what kind of life do you want to have, and what kind of lifestyle could I have with this sort of work? And I certainly don't mean extravagant and expensive necessarily, at least not for me, but maybe it's going to fit into your life better. Maybe it's going to allow you to work the hours that you want, or to have flexibility that you need, or maybe you want a job where you get to travel a whole lot, and you'll get that from your new career. So I think it's a kind of two-part inquiry that you have to do with yourself, which is, what do you truly love, and also what kind of a life are you looking for?
Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. So let's see, Paul, we'll come to you, and asking for any, final kernels of wisdom or advice to someone considering a career change, as well as, how did you know what next step to take in your career, or what career to settle on?
Probably the hardest question we got today is this one for me. My biggest thing, knowing what I know now, is to make sure that if you're contemplating a career change, that you're not just simply running away from something. If you're not totally happy where you are, don't take those negative or difficult situations and force you into making a poor decision on where you want to go. I talked about that patience and methodical nature. make sure you're doing that for yourself as well, and not just running away from something you may not be totally happy with. And how do you know? As someone who has continually said, this is just my next job, it's not my last job. I live by that. You know, we all have come from a different generation to where we're not most of us are not going and punching the time clock for 40 years so we can get that gold-plated wristwatch. We have all come up in a different time where we're looking for different fulfillment at different points in our life, and our employers may not be able to always provide that to us. And so don't be shy or afraid at finding and searching for those opportunities. And it's nothing's forever. Most of the time, nothing is forever. And so don't be shy about that. And that's how I know. And I've found a different satisfaction in each of my career stops. And I'm happy that I've done them. And I can't wait to see what this one brings and what my next one will bring.
That's so great. Thank you. And Carrie, Grogan, what about you? What any advice, parting advice? And then also, how did you know what career to settle on?
Paul's point about not running away just speaks to my soul. There were parts of my last student affairs role that I just really did not like and was not having the best experience for very specific reasons. And I really needed to do that gut check that Paul spoke about to make sure that I wasn't just radically changing to run away from that, but I had identified the parts of my job and my career that I really enjoyed and was still pursuing those parts. And that self-reflection was a really big part of it. What were the things that I enjoyed in my career up until that point, and how could I translate them and still get that same fulfillment? I thought that the only way to present workshops and trainings and have like real heart-to-heart, deep conversations with people, helping them grow, was to be in an entry-level student affairs job. Like the further I went up in that career, the less I got to connect with people and the more I was doing bureaucracy and red tape. And then I discovered that might have been the case with the specific trajectory I was on, but I could use those things in my job and my career that I liked to do something in a whole different realm and probably contribute to it in a new way and in a better way than folks who had approached it from the traditional HR route. And so being open to using my skill set in a new way, it made me really confident that I was landing on the right thing. And if I wasn't, that I would find what came after that. I think that's my biggest advice, is that it is okay to be shaky in this and to not be completely confident. I would be afraid of anyone who just said like 100% I knew that this was it and had no doubts at any point. So it's okay to be a little nervous, but also reflect on the fact that all of your experiences brought you to this. Whether you use that skill set every day in a new career or it's just a footnote of your story, it is still your story. It's still how you became this person who you are today. So don't worry that you've wasted time or you've wasted your degree or you've wasted anything. Nothing is wasted by making this transition, because it's a part of who you are and who you will become and what's next.
That is fabulous. I feel so, at the same time, I feel so like energized and pumped up by this talk today, as well as like reassured and comforted. It's been so incredible. I don't see any other questions in the chat. I will invite John and Dory to throw some up there if there are any other burning questions that we didn't get to, but I wouldn't be surprised if there aren't any, because the stories you told and the insights that you shared were so helpful. There is one that just popped up, and this makes sense, very practical. Just financial changes and challenges that you might have had. And I won't call on anyone. I'll just kind of leave it open for anyone who might want to jump in and share any challenges or, how you addressed them.
I can share on behalf of my husband, who is also an OU alum. Right after I made my change, he decided to stop his job and go back to school for something completely different. He was doing like car sales. His degree was in hospitality. He's gone around the world of careers and then decided to get a degree in, or a certificate in, something with computers. I still don't understand. It's full stack coding. I don't know. I do HR. But
Love it.
so, and he now has a career in it, loves it. It was completely the right path and decision for him. But it was real scary to say like, oh, so you're just not going to have an income and you're just going to go to school and we're just going to hope that my change is going to be um and it was, and it worked out, but he needed to pull from his 401k in order to pay for that. And so it was a real conversation that we had to have and really plan out, like, okay, if you pull this money, when will we repay it? What sort of job will you get, even part-time, if you don't immediately land into a full-time career? And he did wind up tutoring for a couple months in there before he landed something full-time. So like, we planned out all of the worst case scenarios so that if those worst case scenarios happen to come to fruition, we had a plan for what to do.
Good advice. And thanks for sharing so openly. Carrie, I saw you turn your microphone off for a second. It seemed like you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I mean, what I'm sharing is kind of from a small business perspective, but, I guess I would say if having your own business is something that resonates with you, then, surrounding yourself and hiring people who can be the experts for you on those things that you don't know. So, I don't want to be an accountant and I'm not one. And so I have a really great accountant. And I think it's really important if you're going to do something like run your own business to have that. And to figure out what the rules are in your state. I'm a rule follower, and it was really important to me that I set everything up legitimately and that I do things appropriately. And so, finding out how everything works with sales tax and business licenses and all that kind of stuff was important to me. And I think it's okay. I mean, maybe it's not, but it's okay to not have all the answers when you start as well. So, get the experts to help you as much as you can and realize that some things you'll learn as you go. If you're owning your own business, you're going to figure out what kind of invoicing works the best, how it works to complete your contracts, things like that. Some of that stuff you just have to, figure out what works and what doesn't.
Thank you. Paul, did you want to share anything on that one? Okay, if you don't, but.
They do these drawings every Wednesday and Saturday. They're called the lottery, and you can make sure and take care of any of those financial problems by doing that. No, it's very scary. And the only thing that anytime I made a change, the only thing I thought about is I was successful in that prior stop, and if the world falls apart, I can always go back into what I was doing. And so that was my safety net, in the way that my wife and I would talk through it and say, well, if this isn't the right thing, I know that I can do this and go back and find gainful employment without putting us too far into any hole.
Gotcha. Well, thank you. I think with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up today. I know Dory has a few parting resources that she wants to share. Again, I just want to thank all of our panelists today, as well as our participants for joining. I hope everyone feels as energized as I do. And we recorded today's talk. And so within a couple of weeks, we'll have it within our virtual resources on the Ohio University Alumni Association webpage. If you want to go back and, pull any more nuggets of wisdom from today's talk, or share it with friends or colleagues or anything like that. So thank you all so much. And Dory, please wrap us up.
So yes, thank you to all of our panelists for being here today, and thank you for all of our attendees for being here. We at the Alumni Association just want to provide a few more resources, upcoming things that might be interesting to some of you here today. So the first thing I just wanted to touch on is the Bobcat Network. If you're not a part of that space, it is basically kind of like a Bobcat LinkedIn. So we heard a lot about the value of networking and mentorship today. And so that is a place where a lot of Bobcats are connecting and making that happen. So bobcatnetwork.ohio.edu, I definitely recommend checking that out. Additionally, the Career and Leadership Development Center is a space on campus that is operating virtually right now, as most things are on campus. And they also service our alumni. So if you're interested in career coaching, one-on-one individual career coaching, as maybe you're thinking about a change or going through a change, they are a great resource on campus and offer a ton of other things too. So we definitely recommend checking them out. They were really great partners with us. And then additionally, in partnership with this event, we have a few other events coming up, and I figured I'd just highlight the next two. So we have diving back in or re-entering the workforce for those who have been out of the workforce, whether by choice or not. Again, lots of reasons that people have to re-enter the workforce. So that will be hosted on February 9th at 1 p.m. And actually the CLDC will be leading that as well. And then we have Eyes on the Future, planning for retirement. So ties in perfectly to some of the financial things we were ending on a note here. That will be on February 16th at 11 a.m. with our financial consultant, Paul Gaidash, who is an alum from OU. So we're super excited to have him as well. So definitely recommend, if you're interested in any of those, signing up. And if you all have any questions, you can feel free to email me or I'm happy to be available for anyone on the call at branchd@ohio.edu. And I just appreciate, again, I just want to say thank you so much to our panelists for being here today. You guys are awesome. You wear the Bobcat family, make the Bobcat family proud. So we appreciate you being here today. So with that, thank you everyone for being here, and we'll see you soon.